Hello, I'm Microsoft MVP Tom Morgan. As we come to the end of this series of videos on building declarative agents with API plugins for Microsoft Copilot, I just wanted to take a moment. It's almost like an outro or a post example chat, just to talk through some of the things I learned, some of the gotchas and limitations I came up against. So in the last video, you saw the end-to-end walkthrough. You've already seen the demo, and so you know how to build the thing, and you know how to go and build your own. And hopefully, you've got some really good ideas now, and you've got everything you need to go and build your own. I just wanted to cover through, like I say, some of the things I picked up along the way. And so I hope you won't mind. I've got them written down in this notebook, so I'm kind of refer to them as I go. The first one, and we did talk about this a little bit in the last video, is developer mode. So that's a really key tool you'll want to turn on, is that developer mode. Get it turned on, because anytime you have a problem calling your API, you may not know that's what's happened, because the Copilot chat will do quite a good job of shielding the error from the user. It might try and work around it. It might just try and carry on anyway, even though it couldn't call the API. A lot of the time it will sort of say, oh, sorry, there was a problem, but it will follow it up with, something else, and it's really easy to miss. So yeah, do that. And then I would say you do want to validate that all of your API calls are being made correctly. And then you want to get through any issues there, authentication, structure, and all the rest of it. Which leads me actually nicely onto another point, which is kind of interesting. As developers, we have, this golden rule around user input, right? Where you don't trust user input. You always sanitize user input. If you're building a user interface, you'll do some validation somewhere that what the users put in, before it gets to your data store or your business logic or something like that, you've validated it, you've checked it, so you can rely on it. Working with something like a Copilot that makes those calls for you introduces another level that you've got to be really careful about. And actually, the API layer is often not the layer where you would do that validation. Quite often, user input validation is done at the user interface level before it gets passed. So there's an assumption that you are passing clean data to the API. That's not always true with something like Copilot, because you can tell Copilot, and the open API spec will tell Copilot the structure of the data and what needs to happen. Business logic errors can still kind of creep in. So I'll give you an example of that. As part of the closed pilot demo that you've seen, one of the things you can do is update clothing as being marked. When you do that, and in the instruction set, I've said you need to pass the ID of the thing being updated, and also the category, because I was being lazy. I did the back end in an Azure storage table, so I use the category as the partition. So I need both the partition and the key name to update it. So I needed the category of the clothing, and I also needed the ID. What I was finding, I was getting some really weird errors, and because I had developer mode on, I had a look. And Copilot was actually changing the name of the category. It was reclassifying my clothing away from what I had said. So for an example, I don't know, I might have had some shorts, and it reclassified them as trousers or bottoms or something like that. And it was breaking the update, because obviously that isn't the partition name that it was in the data store. Easily corrected with an additional instruction. But it's things like that you've got to be really careful of sanitizing the input. You've got to treat Copilot as a user when it comes to sanitizing your input for your APIs. I did find as well, I needed to change the shape of my API sometimes. So Copilot is still really new. If you think back, none of this world existed, 2-3 years ago? So all of this code has been written since then. And so there are definitely rough edges, and there's things that the team are working on every day, and there's improvements coming all of the time. And the pace of change inside Microsoft at the moment is phenomenal and is absolutely to be applauded. That's not to say there aren't problems and there aren't rough edges. You might find you come up against things where the data can't be called in the way you want, or the structure. Particularly, you might find you have a valid OpenAPI spec file, but it still doesn't get imported correctly, or when you try to use it through the Teams Toolkit scaffolding, for whatever reason, it doesn't work. I think these are just teething problems. They're going to go away soon. It's a bit of trial and error. Again, it's another good reason to have that abstraction API that I've talked about a lot in the prerequisite step, because it gives you that flexibility to be able to change the structure of the API to keep Copilot happy. One of the other limitations at the moment is that you can only make a single post call in every conversation turn. So you can make multiple gets, and you've seen in the demo, multiple gets are made to combine that information. You can only make a single post at the moment. So if you're planning on making lots of posts, just be aware that at the moment there's that limitation. So you might need to try and combine them into a single call. The other interesting area that I found a bit challenging was around the responsible AI guidelines. So when you provision your application, your whole experience, if you like, or your instruction set, the whole thing that makes up your declarative agent is passed through the responsible AI guidelines, and it might fail. And if it fails, the provisioning fails, you can't provision your product. I found some real challenges around the responsible AI guidelines when it came to the image generation. What I was trying to do was have it generate an image that was kind of close to me. So I would describe, when you're creating your images, it should be of, a male in their 40s. And I would sort of describe things like my skin tone and my hair color, facial features. All of those are massive no-nos for responsible AI. So at the moment, for me personally, it feels like the responsible AI guidelines are a little bit hair trigger, and they get triggered a little bit too easily. I understand why, and I applaud Microsoft for the job they're doing in this area. Just be aware of it, as a developer. Just be aware that might come up, and you might just need to take a lot of that stuff out and be much more generic about it, because as soon as you start being as soon as you tread down any one of those paths, you set off the RAI alarm. By the way, it is clear when that happens, you'll know about it. It comes up in the provisioning step. It comes up at the errors are good, and they tell you why. They tell you it's an RAI. They don't tell you what to do about it, but they tell you you failed RAI guidelines. So through a process of trial and error, it'll be something probably in your instruction file, so you can kind of take that out and just try again and just add it back in slowly. The other thing as well, I think sometimes the guidelines are also slightly non-deterministic. I feel like they use a little bit of AI in there as well. So sometimes something works and then the next time it might not. So just be aware those things exist. That's everything I learned building declarative agents with API plugins for Microsoft Copilot. It was a really fun journey. I think they're a really useful tool. I think lots of enterprises could really benefit from using them. I think the power of them is really, really going to change a lot of things, I think, when people really understand how they can be used and embed them deeply into their workflows. I think they could make a real difference. Thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or this series of videos, consider subscribing. That way, as I build more ones, I'm thinking about maybe doing something around Copilot Studio. Then you'll get those as well. And there's a bunch of other videos I do as well. I do weekly update videos and videos on all sorts of other things as well. So you can check all of those out on my YouTube channel. There's a podcast, there's a blog, all the things. Thanks very much for watching.